At exactly 2:37 a.m., every dog in Dry Creek started howling. It wasn't just barking, it was panic. A primal, guttural wail that vibrated through the still desert night. The kind of sound that made the hairs on your arms stand straight up before your brain could explain why. By 2:38 a.m., car alarms were blaring. The power flickered once, twice, then held, and by 2:39 a.m., the ground began to hum. I was already awake when it happened. Couldn't sleep. Something had felt off all night. A tension in the air, like the sky was holding its breath. Then came the noise, a low, metallic groan. It wasn't thunder. It wasn't a jet. It was something else entirely. Something vast, mechanical, and impossibly deep, like a planet groaning in pain. The next morning, the hole was there. A mile wide, nearly perfect in shape, just outside the town's western perimeter, where the desert meets the ridgeline. No tremors, no smoke, no debris, just a clean, circular void that hadn't existed 12 hours earlier. People gathered around it. First locals, then news crews, then helicopters. No one could explain it. Scientists set up gear. Military cordoned it off. But the desert held its silence. I remember standing at the edge that morning, squinting into the dark, windless chasm. My brother Jake, a geologist, stood beside me, pale and sweating. "It's not a sinkhole," he whispered. "It's too smooth, too clean, like it was cut." We both leaned forward. And then, far below, miles down, where the black met darker black, something moved, something blinked. And just like that, we knew we were already too close. By the third day, they started sending drones. Tiny metal specks dipped into the hole like cautious insects, their lights vanishing into the pitch almost instantly. The video feeds cut out within seconds. No matter how deep they tried to go, they lost signal. "It's like the Hood. Ella eats radio waves," Jake muttered, watching a fourth drone disappear from the screen. "No reflection, no depth echo. It's not just empty down there. It's wrong." The perimeter was expanded. Black-suited men arrived in unmarked SUVs. Not military, not government. Or at least not the kind that wore badges. They set up tents, satellite dishes, cameras that never blinked. Locals were pushed back behind barricades. Still, we came. In silence. Drawn like moths. Something about the hole. It called. I don't mean metaphorically. I mean I heard it. A low, rhythmic thrum in the back of my skull when I stood too close. It was subtle at first. Like a heartbeat not your own. But the longer you stayed, the more you felt it. The more you wanted to get closer. By the end of the week, 2 people had already jumped. No scream, no flailing. They walked up to the edge and just stepped off. Their names were Caroline and Travis. She was a waitress at Red Rock Diner. He worked the gas station on Route 12. They weren't close, no history of mental illness, no cults, no notes, just blank-eyed stares and silent dives into the void. Jake and I watched the footage over and over that night in his trailer, pausing on Caroline's last second. "She's smiling," he whispered. He was right. A soft, peaceful smile, as if she'd just remembered something beautiful, something she was returning to, something waiting. A week after the hole appeared, the wind stopped. Not slowed, stopped. The desert, usually restless with dry gusts and shifting sands, hung silent and breathless. Dust no longer blew across the ground. The heat sat heavy and unmoving, like the air itself had thickened into something unnatural. The world felt paused. And then the voices began. Not loud, not even audible at first, but when you stood near the rim long enough, you could feel them, like whispers beneath your thoughts, like ideas that weren't your own, unspooling softly in your mind. Jake started waking up in the middle of the night, drenched in sweat, muttering things in his sleep. Equations, coordinates, phrases and languages neither of us recognized. I started recording it. One night his voice shifted. It was deeper, measured, like something speaking through it. "I see you, little flame," it said. "You burn bright now, but soon you will fall." I played it back the next day. Jake didn't remember saying it, didn't want to hear it. He was scared. "I think it's pulling us in, Cat," he told me, lighting another cigarette with shaking hands. "Not just physically, mentally, spiritually, like it's aware." I didn't argue. I had begun dreaming of the hole too, except in my dreams, it wasn't just a void. It opened. Something massive moved beneath it, coiling shapes, dripping and blind, covered in wet scales and ancient symbols. Something alive and waiting. The men in black began packing up their tents on day 10. They didn't give a reason. They didn't take their equipment. They didn't speak. They just drove away. And that night, for the first time since it appeared, the hole answered back. The ground shook at exactly 3:03 a.m. Not an earthquake. It was too rhythmic, too precise. 4 pulses, like a giant heartbeat reverberating under the desert floor. I bolted upright in bed. Jake was all right. Eddie outside, barefoot, shirtless, eyes locked on the distant rim glowing under the moonlight. "Did you feel that?" I asked. He nodded. "It's waking up." The sheriff's department set up a checkpoint near the access road, trying to keep people out. It didn't matter. They came anyway. Scientists, conspiracy theorists, journalists, cultists, dressed in white linen with silver paint smeared across their faces. People with wide eyes and cracked voices. Some chanted, some just stood and stared. The sheriff shot a man who tried to run past the barricade, screaming, "It's inside me! I can feel it breathing!" No charges were filed, no questions asked. We were on our own now. Jake and I drove out past the perimeter at sunset against every warning. He wanted readings. I wanted answers. As we approached the hole, we saw it. The edges had changed. No longer a smooth circle, now jagged, fractal-like shapes had begun to carve themselves into the rim. Geometric patterns that pulsed faintly with a bluish light like veins under skin, as if the hole was growing eyes. Jake dropped to one knee and pressed his palm to the sand. His body jolted, eyes rolled back, mouth opened wide, but no scream came out. Instead, he whispered 3 words, "It's not Earth." I pulled him back, slapping his face until he gasped and came to. He didn't remember saying anything, but I did, and I couldn't stop hearing them, echoing in my skull like an infection. "It's not Earth." The next morning, Jake started digging. Not at the hole itself. That was suicide now. He said he saw something in his mind during that blackout. A place about 2 miles east, just past Devil's Ridge, where the sand sounded hollow. It made no sense, but something about the urgency in his voice told me not to argue. We drove out in silence, the sun rising like a bruise over the cracked hills. The desert was dead still again. Not even insects chirping, just the crunch of tires on gravel and Jake's breath coming fast and shallow. We found the place easily. A patch of desert flat as a tabletop. Nothing unusual except for one thing. It was cold. Not desert chill. Unnatural cold. The kind that made your breath frost, despite the 90-degree heat just 20 feet away. Jake grabbed a shovel from the truck and started digging like a man possessed. He hit something on the 3rd strike. A clink, like steel on stone. I knelt and brushed the sand away with my hands. It wasn't rock. It was a surface. Smooth, metallic, covered in symbols. A massive disc, maybe 20 feet across, buried just below the sand. We cleared more of it, found grooves, concentric rings, faint ridges like teeth. It looked like a hatch. Jake ran back to the truck for tools. I stayed kneeling, staring at the alien patterns. The longer I looked, the more they seemed to shift, subtly, lines bending in ways they shouldn't. I blinked and swore one of the symbols pulsed red. Then I heard it again. A voice, not from the outside, but inside my skull. "Thank you for finding me." I recoiled, stumbled backward. My hands were trembling. The hatch was no longer cold. It was warm. Jake returned with a crowbar. but before he could touch the hatch, it began to move. Not open, breathe. A slow rise and fall, like lungs expanding beneath sand and steel. The air around it vibrated, humming just below Tintstolen. He threshold of hearing, and the hairs on my arms prickled as if I stood too close to a power line. "Cat," Jake whispered. "It's alive." The words hit me like a slap. Not a machine, not a relic, not some long-buried piece of alien tech. This was something living, or worse, waking. He knelt beside it again, running his fingers along the glyphs like they were familiar, as if they whispered back to him. His eyes glazed over, lips moving soundlessly. I grabbed his shoulder, pulled hard. "Snap out of it." He blinked and stumbled back. "Sorry, it was like it knew me, like it was remembering me." Before we could speak again, the hatch exhaled. A blast of hot, fetid air hissed up from the grooves, carrying with it a stink that stopped my breath, like rotting meat and burned hair soaked in brine. The kind of smell that clings to your clothes, your tongue, your soul. Something below had opened. We both stepped back as the metal began to separate into triangular plates, folding outward like a mechanical flower. Darkness yawned beneath it, and from that black mouth we heard a sound that didn't belong in our world. Wet, slithering, moving. I turned to run. Jake didn't. He was staring down into it, hypnotized, smiling. "We were never alone," he said softly. Then he jumped in, and I was too slow to stop him. I screamed his name into the hole until my voice broke. No echo came back. Just silence, deep and endless. I didn't follow. I couldn't. Something primal rooted me to the ground. That cold, ancient voice in my head whispering, "Not yet." The hatch resealed itself like it had never opened. The plates clicked into place with a sickening finality, and the warmth disappeared instantly. Only smooth metal remained, blank and unreadable. Jake was gone. I drove back to town in a daze, hands shaking on the wheel, every mile a blur of sun-scorched sand and whispering wind. I didn't go home. I went straight to the sheriff. He didn't believe me. Or maybe he did and didn't want to get involved. He looked tired, sunburnt, hollow-eyed like most people these days. When I told him about the hatch, about Jake jumping in, he just shook his head. "You've been too close for too long," he muttered. "It gets in your blood." That phrase stuck with me. It gets in your blood. I went back to Jake's trailer. His laptop was still on. The screen glowed with a map, coordinates, drawn lines, pulsing heat signatures overlaid on desert topography. He had been tracking something, movement patterns, pulses, openings. I found his notebook, page after page filled with sketches of the hole, the hatch, the symbols. And beneath one drawing, in thick black ink, he'd written, "They built it to hold something in, but the skin of the earth is thinning." I sat there until the sun set. Then I heard it. A knock. 3 slow knocks on the trailer door. I opened it fast. No one was there, just footprints in the sand, leading away. Barefoot. That night I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Jake's face. Not terrified, but calm, serene, like he'd stepped into something he understood better than the world he left behind. Just before dawn, his voice came through the radio. I was in his trailer, dozing off, when the old ham set on his desk crackled to life. Static first, then garbled tones, then a whisper, warped, distant, but unmistakably Jake. "Cat, you were right. It's not just a hole. It's a wound." I froze. There are things beneath the desert, old things, bound things. They've been dreaming us. The radio cut to static, then silence. I lunged forward, twisting the dials, scanning channels. Nothing. Then just as I started to lose hope, the voice came again. Not Jake this time. Low, inhuman, like stone grinding on bone. "Do not look for him. You are not welcome below." Then it laughed, a bubbling, wet sound that made my stomach flip, and the radio melted. Sparks flew. The metal warped in seconds, the plastic face dripping onto the floor like candle wax. Whatever was down there could reach up. I packed a bag. Not out of courage, out of obsession. I couldn't leave Jake down there, and I couldn't live knowing something ancient and hungry was shifting beneath us. At dawn, I drove back to the hatch, but it wasn't alone anymore. A dozen people stood around it in silence, strangers, blank-faced, like they were sleepwalking. Some held objects, bones, jars of teeth, dead birds wrapped in cloth. I tried to speak. They turned to look at me, and in perfect unison they whispered, "We are the soil, he is the seed." And then they knelt, heads bowed toward the hatch, waiting, heading back toward the hole. They didn't move. The desert wind picked up, kicking dust into the air, but the kneelers stayed frozen, eyes closed, hands trembling in some silent prayer. One of them, a teenage girl with blood crusted at the corners of her mouth, began to hum, low, monotonous, wordless. The others joined her. Not a song, not quite. It was a frequency. The sound vibrated in my spine. I stumbled backward, pressing my hands over my ears, but the hum wasn't in the air. It was in me, inside my teeth, my bones, my memories. I tried to scream, but my throat locked up. Something behind the hum pressed against my mind, something vast, ancient, and mercilessly aware. I turned and ran. Back to the truck, back through the scrub and dust. I didn't stop until I hit the first bend in the road out of the basin. When I looked back, the hatch was glowing. A soft, pulsing blue light traced the lines of the metal plates. From this distance, it looked like a beating heart buried just beneath the surface. The kneelers began to chant words now, harsh syllables that felt like they scratched the air. Their bodies jerked in rhythm, like marionettes tugged by invisible hands. Their mouths moved independently of their eyes, and those eyes were blank. No pupils, no whites, just black, glassy orbs reflecting the hole behind them. The hum rose again, louder now, and I felt something under my feet, vibrations. The hatch was opening again. I should have kept running, but I didn't, because I saw him. At the rim of the hatch, staring up at me through the shimmering heat and dust, stood Jake. But something was wrong. He was smiling too wide, and he wasn't alone. I stumbled closer, my feet dragging through the sand like they didn't belong to me. Jake didn't move, just stood there at the rim, barefoot, skin gray with dust, hands limp at his sides. His smile was frozen, too wide, too still, but it was chaud, his eyes that stopped me cold. They weren't brown anymore. They weren't even human. They shimmered, liquid black, reflective like oil. And behind them, I saw something moving. Something with no shape, like smoke and claws and mouths without sound. "Jake," I said. He tilted his head. "That name is gone," he replied. His voice was layered, Jake's tone but deeper, hollow, like it echoed from a cave behind his throat. He made room. My mouth went dry. Room for what? His smile twitched. For me. The sky dimmed, though the sun hadn't moved. The chanting behind me grew louder. The desert air tightened, dense and charged like before a lightning strike. The sand trembled beneath our feet. Jake, or whatever wore his skin, stepped forward. "You heard it, didn't you? The call. It sings to the ones who listen." I tried to back away, but my legs locked. My ears rang, my vision blurred at the edges. "You are part of this," he said. "You always were. Your blood carries the memory." I wanted to scream, to run, but I was stuck, frozen in dread as the thing in Jake raised a trembling hand and pressed a finger to his temple. "You'll remember soon, when the sky breaks, when the earth peels." Then he turned and walked backward into the hatch, vanishing into the pulsing blue glow. The kneelers stopped chanting. All of them turned to face me, smiling. And then, together, they whispered. One by one, we returned. I didn't remember driving home. 1 minute I was standing before the hatch, the next I was waking up on my couch, clothes coated in dust, mouth dry, radio hissing static on the floor. My skin felt too tight. My tongue tasted like rust. Something had followed me back. The trailer felt wrong, tilted, off balance. I stumbled into the bathroom, flicked on the light, and gasped. My nose was bleeding. Not a trickle, a pour. Thick, dark red, staining my shirt, matting my hair. I pressed a towel to my face, but it kept coming, and beneath the panic was a deeper fear. I couldn't feel it. No pain, no pressure, just warm liquid slipping down my chin like tears. I looked up at the mirror and froze. The reflection blinked, half a second after I did. Not in sync. Not natural. I stumbled back, heart pounding. I wasn't alone anymore. There were whispers in my ears, not audible, but there. Flickers of language I didn't understand, murmured directly into my brain like thoughts that didn't belong to me. Visions flashed behind my eyes, spiraling tunnels, flickering lights, things that swam through the dark without eyes or flesh. I couldn't stay here. I grabbed Jake's notebook and bolted. Outside, the sky was the wrong shade of blue. The clouds pulsed ever so slightly, like they were breathing. The neighbor's dog lay stiff on the porch, eyes wide open, tongue swollen black, dead. And written on the concrete beneath it, in something dark and sticky, was a message. You've been marked. You're part of the pattern now. I backed away slowly, heart in my throat, and realized whatever I'd brought back from the hatch, it was inside me now, and it wasn't alone. I didn't notice the mark until nightfall. It started as an itch behind my shoulder blade, deep under the skin, like something moving beneath the surface. I stripped off my shirt and twisted in front of the mirror, using my phone's camera to get a better look. That's when I saw it. A spiral, burned into my flesh like a brand. Thin, jagged lines, too perfect to be accidental. It pulsed faintly, like it was alive, like it was watching. I dropped the phone. The spiral was the same one from Jake's drawings, the same shape I saw carved into the rim of the hatch. It wasn't just a symbol, it was a signature, and now it was mine. I spent the next hour scrubbing it raw with steel wool and soap until my skin bled. It didn't fade, didn't even smudge. It was beneath the skin, permanent, claimed. I sat on the floor, shaking, blood mixing with sweat, and tried to remember how things had spiraled this far. But that word, spiral, kept circling in my head like a mantra, a loop I couldn't escape. That's when I heard the knocking again. Not at the door this time, inside the walls. Soft, deliberate taps, 3, then 4, then silence. I pressed my ear against the drywall. Something whispered from the other side. You are becoming. I grabbed Jake's notebook, flipping through page after page of scribbled madness, and there it was, halfway through, drawn in a circle of red ink. Stage 1, the mark. Stage 2, the visions. Stage 3, the hunger. Beneath it, in shaky handwriting. If you get to stage 4, it's too late. I felt my stomach turn as a taste filled my mouth, copper, raw, and sweet. The hunger had begun. They started falling from the sky just after sunrise. First a single raven, then 2 more, then a dozen. By mid-morning, the power lines outside were littered with the twitching, broken bodies of desert birds, crows, hawks, vultures, all lying still, wings spread like black petals on the sand. No wounds, no blood, just dead, as if something invisible had reached up and turned them off mid-flight. I watched from the porch, still shirtless, the spiral brand on my back itching like wildfire. Every time I blinked, the world seemed a little off. Colors too sharp, sounds too far away. I could hear the flies buzzing over the dead things, but they sounded like screaming. High, thin, endless. The birds had known something. They always did. I opened Jake's notebook again, flipped toward the end. That's when I found the sketch of a raven, one eye gouged out, the other glowing with ink. Around it were scribbled words. They gather before the breach. They warn before the mouth opens. Then another line. If the bird stops circling, the hole is no longer waiting. It's ready. I felt eyes on me, turned slowly. There, down the road near the scrub line, a figure watching. One of the kneelers, still painted white, still barefoot, but now her eyes were open. She was grinning. Wide, cracked lips stretched too far. Her mouth moved, but I couldn't hear words. She raised a hand and pointed to the horizon. I turned to look, and that's when I saw it. Out near the hatch, the sand had split open. Not a circle, not a clean line, a crack, like the desert skin tearing down the middle. The hole was growing, and something inside it was climbing out. That night, the desert glowed, not with fire, not with moonlight, but with a sickly greenish hue that bled from the ground itself, seeping through the sand like bioluminescent veins. It pulsed in time with the throbbing. In my back, every beat of that spiral mark felt synced to something below, something that had opened its eyes and found me. I couldn't stay inside. I grabbed a flashlight and my knife and walked. The air grew thicker the closer I got to the hatch, not hotter, but denser, like moving through underwater pressure. My ears popped, my vision blurred at the edges. I wasn't alone. Shapes moved just beyond the beam of my light, long-limbed, stilted, too tall to be human. I heard clicking sounds, like teeth chattering fast and hard. But when I swung the flashlight toward the noise, there was only empty desert. Then came the wind. Except it didn't touch my skin. It passed through me, inside me, and with it came a voice. No, many voices, layered, jumbled, whispering over each other in dozens of tongues I didn't know but somehow understood. It has begun. The seal is torn, the flesh will break, the gate will bleed. I fell to my knees, clutching my head as the voices drilled into my skull. Blood poured from my nose again, and something touched me. Not skin, not fingers, something wet, cold, slick like tentacle or tongue. It brushed my ankle and wrapped. I screamed and kicked. My flashlight spun across the sand, flickering. In its glow, I saw it. Just for a second. A hand, but not human. Too long, too many joints, skin like stone soaked in oil, fingernails jagged like broken glass. Then it slipped away, back into the crack, and the ground stopped glowing. But the spiral in my back, it burned red. I didn't go home. I couldn't. My body felt foreign, hijacked. The spiral on my back throbbed like a second heart, radiating heat down my spine. I could feel it growing, stretching under my skin like a root system. My muscles twitched without warning. My jaw ached from clenching. I drove until the headlights caught the edge of the gas station on Route 12, the one where Travis used to work before he jumped. The place was abandoned now, the glass shattered, lights dead, weeds growing through the cracks in the concrete. But I wasn't alone. A woman stood by the pump. Middle-aged, sunburned, her eyes bloodshot and wild. She turned when she heard the engine and stumbled toward me, barefoot, muttering. I stepped out of the truck slowly. "They're under us," she whispered. "They were never above, never stars. We got it backwards. We got all of it backwards." Her shirt was soaked in something dark. She pulled it up without warning, exposing her stomach. And there it was, the spiral. Etched deep into her flesh, but more than that, connected. It pulsed in rhythm with mine. My back ached in response. "It's a map," she croaked. "A door. You're marked too, I see it. We're chosen to open the way." "What's on the other side?" I asked. She smiled, weeping now. "Not a god, not a devil, something older than both. It doesn't want worship, it wants skin." She pressed something into my hand, cold, metal, a compass. But the needle spun wildly in every direction until I faced west. Then it stopped. Toward the hatch, toward the crack, toward Jake. "It's calling us back," she whispered. Then she collapsed, dead before she hit the ground. I buried her behind the station. It felt pointless, ceremonial. The ground was too dry, the sky too wrong. but it seemed like something I had to do. Like if I didn't, the spiral on my back would crawl deeper into me. The calm path still pointed west. I followed it. The road back toward the hatch was empty, the desert silent except for the sound of my tires crunching over gravel. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was pacing me, just beyond the reach of my headlights. A flicker of movement here, a low hiss of sand shifting there. The spiral throbbed harder as I neared the ridge, and that's when I saw it. The second hole. It hadn't been there before. Half the size of the original, but just as clean, just as black. The sand around it had curled outward, as if peeled open from below, like something had clawed its way out. I stopped the truck and stepped out. The compass needle spun again, then locked onto the new hole. It was growing. That's when I realized the truth. The spiral wasn't just marking me. It was tracking them. The creatures. The ones beneath the hatch weren't waiting anymore. They were spreading. The infection wasn't contained. Jake had been the first, but he wouldn't be the last. These holes weren't random. They were gateways. The sky rippled overhead, and I smelled salt, like seawater on a hot iron plate. The air buzzed with static, and a low moan rolled across the sand, a sound like 1,000 people breathing in unison. I looked down into the new hole. No movement, no sound. But then a voice rose up from the dark. Open more. When I got back to town, the signal had changed. All the TVs, every one of them, and every shop window, diner, and broken down house were flickering, static, but beneath it, a pattern, a spiral, spinning slow and steady, looping endlessly. On the radios, no music, no voices, just a deep droning hum, layered with something just below hearing, words you couldn't quite make out, but that still made your spine curl, like your subconscious understood them, even if your ears didn't. People were watching. Some just stood in the street, eyes glassy, mouths slack, heads tilted as if in a trance. Others murmured quietly to themselves, scratching their arms or carving spirals into the walls of buildings. The infection wasn't hiding anymore. It was announcing itself. I stopped outside the old sheriff's station. The door was open, lights off. Inside, a trail of bloody handprints led down the hall. I called out, but no one answered. Then, from one of the cells, I heard whispering. I found the sheriff there. Still alive. Barely. He was curled in the corner, face gaunt, lips split and dry, eyes sunk so deep into his skull they looked hollow. He smiled when he saw me. "They're birthing," he croaked. "Through us, using us like tunnels." "Where's Jake?" I asked. He just laughed, or tried to. Blood bubbled from his mouth. "They let me see, just once. What's coming through?" He gripped my wrist, suddenly strong. "You think it's coming from the desert?" he hissed. No, the desert's the last stop. This thing, this god, has been digging through dimensions. And now, it's almost through." He dropped his hand. His body convulsed once, then went still. On the wall beside him, smeared in blood, was a message. "The sky is next." I staggered out of the station into the fading light. The clouds had changed. No longer wisps or swells. They were structured, layered and spiraling. G-bands, concentric rings stretching outward from a single dark point overhead, like a storm trying to form a mouth. The spiral was in the sky now. Every instinct screamed to run, but where? The ground was no longer safe. The air, the people, even the signals around us had been infected, and above it all, I felt it watching. From behind the clouds, from whatever ancient place this thing was coming from, I looked up. For a moment, I swore I saw a shape drifting behind the spiral clouds. Something too large to comprehend, long and skeletal, dragging across the sky like a god-sized centipede. Its silhouette moved against the moon, casting impossible shadows across the desert. And it was getting closer. The compass in my hand snapped. The the metal bent inward, pulled by an invisible force, not magnetic, gravitational. The desert was bending. Back at my truck, I found a man waiting for me in the driver's seat. His eyes were stitched shut with wire. His mouth hung open like a broken hinge. I jerked the door open. He didn't flinch. He held a photograph in his hand of me and Jake, taken years ago, scrawled across the back in crude black ink. "He remembers you. You're part of the key." And then the man spoke, without moving his lips. "The sky will break when the gate finishes breathing. The last mouth will open, and you'll be standing at the center." He collapsed forward, dead. No blood, no wounds, just empty. And in the sky above me, the spiral winked. I didn't sleep, couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard it, breathing. Not just in the air, inside me, inside my bones. Like the hole had followed me. I drove out of town at dawn, back toward the first crater, but something was wrong. The desert had changed. The landmarks were gone. No Joshua trees, no rusted mile markers, just endless bone-dry dunes under a pale, flickering sun. It was like the world had been rewritten overnight. And the spiral on my back, it wasn't dormant anymore. It pulsed, throbbed, moved, like it was growing roots beneath my skin. I could feel something crawling beneath the surface, dragging itself through veins and nerves, tracing every cell, like it was mapping me. Then I blacked out. When I came to, I wasn't in the truck anymore. I was in a tunnel, but not dirt or stone. This one pulsed, flexed, its walls slick and warm, breathing. I realized, horrified, I wasn't in a place. I was inside something. A voice echoed through the flesh. "You are the threshold." I ran. The walls shuddered with every step, quivering like muscle under strain. Faces stretched from the membrane, half-formed, whispering, begging. They looked like people from town, like Jake, like my father. I burst through a membrane and tumbled onto the desert floor, coughing up black dust. I was back beside the crater. Except, it wasn't just a crater anymore. The edges had curled upward, twisting into spines and ribs, spiraling into the sky like a massive, yawning mouth. It wasn't a hole in the earth. It was the beginning of something alive, and we were standing on its tongue. The wind had stopped. No rustle of sand, no distant calls of birds, just a thick, absolute silence, like sound itself had been vacuumed from the world. I stood at the edge of the mile-wide mouth, staring into an impossible darkness that twisted and shimmered as if it were alive. The hole wasn't just a void. It was listening. And then, it spoke. Not in words, but in tones. Low, harmonic vibrations began to rise from the pit, like a choir sung in reverse. It shook the sand, shook my teeth, shook the parts of me that weren't physical. The sound was reaching inside my memories. Suddenly I was 6 again, holding my father's hand by the campfire. Then I was in high school, sitting beside Jake, sharing a cigarette, watching the stars. Then, the day Jake disappeared, the last thing he said to me, "You ever wonder if the desert is watching us?" Then the voice layered over the sound, low, gentle, female. "We seed the minds of those closest to the center. You called him back to us. You opened the gate." I clutched my head. Blood dripped from my ears. I staggered backward. In the sand behind me, footprints appeared, one by one, leading away from the mouth. I followed. Every step was heavier. The gravity twisted strangely, like I was walking across a slope that didn't exist. The desert spun, even though I wasn't moving. Then the prints stopped, in the middle of nothing. And lying there, face down in the sand, was Jake's jacket. I dropped to my knees. Inside the pocket was a cassette tape and a note. "Play this at the center, not before, not after. And don't trust your reflection." I looked up, and my reflection was standing right in front of me. It didn't move, just stood there. My reflection, same shirt, same scars, same dirt-streaked face, but its eyes were wrong, too still, too curious, like it was studying me, remembering how to be me. I took a step back. It took a step forward. We mirrored each other until I didn't move, and it did. That's when I knew. This thing wasn't copying me. It was becoming me. I lunged forward, swung at its face, but my fist went through it like smoke. It evaporated into a fine mist of ash and wind. A voice, my own voice, spoke behind me. "You're too late. The shape is set. The whole has chosen." I spun. No one there. But suddenly I felt hollow, like something had been scooped out of me when I wasn't looking. Some invisible core had been peeled away. The cassette tape burned in my hand. I stared at the label. No writing, no side A or B, just a tiny etched spiral in the plastic. I tucked it into my coat and ran. The desert cracked beneath my feet. Thin spiderweb fractures stretched outward from the hole in every direction. Chasms opened, coughing out steam and sulfur. The world was splintering. And then I saw it. On the far ridge, a weathered tower, ancient, angular, metal and stone braided together, covered in symbols like the ones carved into Jake's bones. It was the only thing still standing in this shifting landscape. The center, the place where the answers waited. I gripped the tape tighter. If Jake left this for me, then that tower, it's where he went, where he became part of all this. Whatever the hole was, it wanted me to go home. The tower was taller than it looked, its top hidden in the ash-gray clouds. As I got closer, the world grew quiet again, not just silent, but emptied. No breeze, no breath, like everything living had stepped away. Its walls were made of some blackened alloy, ancient yet untouched by rust. Symbols shimmered faintly. Along its base, glowing in soft pulses, like a heartbeat in metal. The same spiral glyph repeated, always turning inward. As I reached the base, my legs buckled. Something pushed back. A pressure in my skull, like the air itself was trying to turn me around. I forced my body forward. The tower opened. No hinges, no door. It unfolded, layers peeling away like flower petals in reverse, revealing a narrow corridor lit by a flickering red pulse. The moment I stepped inside, the door resealed, and I was alone with the heartbeat. The walls were lined with reflective panels, mirrors that breathed. My face flickered in them, but not just mine. I saw Jake, Dad, Mom, even people I'd never met. Dozens of versions of me, young, old, burned, smiling, screaming. One of them looked directly at me and whispered, "You're the last face." Then they all turned away. I climbed the spiral staircase, each step vibrating through my bones. My reflection moved in the mirrored wall beside me, except at one point, it stopped and stared, mouth moving, but no sound. I leaned in, trying to read the lips. "Don't play the tape." My heart stuttered. It knew what I had. The cassette in my pocket felt hot, pulsing in sync with the tower's light. When I reached the top, the room was circular, windowless, and empty, except for a single old cassette player already waiting. As if everything had led me here. The cassette player was old, dusty, the kind with big clunky buttons that clicked loud when pressed. A thin film of sand coated its surface, but it was intact, like someone had been using it. My fingers trembled as I pulled the tape from my coat. The spiral etched into it seemed deeper now, like it wanted to pull my eyes inside. Not before, not after, only at the center. I slid the cassette in. It locked with a soft click. I hovered over the play button. Everything in me screamed, "Don't." But something deeper, a voice I didn't recognize but felt, whispered, "You came all this way. You're part of it now." I pressed play. The speakers hissed, then popped, and then a low hum filled the room. Not a song, not words, a signal. It crawled up the back of my spine. my vision blurred. I stumbled back as the walls began to melt, not physically, but perceptually. Suddenly, I wasn't alone. A figure stood across the room. Tall, thin, wearing Jake's jacket. But it wasn't Jake. Its face was a shifting mass, flickering through faces I knew. Mom, Jake, me, over and over again like it was trying them on. The tape is the key, it said in my voice. The hole is a door. Then the hum turned to a pulse, deep, rhythmic. The spiral on the tape spun faster. The tower shuddered. Cracks spidered across the mirrored walls, revealing what was behind them. Eyes, hundreds, watching, blinking in sync with the pulse. I turned to the figure. "What is this?" I gasped. It smiled with a mouth that wasn't human. "You've opened it." And then the floor collapsed. I fell through blackness. No wind, no up, no down. Just endless falling. And then, impact, but not pain. I landed gently, like being caught by a living floor. Warm, breathing. The walls glistened around me. Flesh, not stone. I was inside something. No longer in the tower. No longer in the world. The hum was even. Right where now? Not from a machine, but from the walls themselves. A deep, organic throb, like the heartbeat of a god-sized thing asleep and dreaming. The corridor ahead pulsed with light, leading me forward. I walked. Each step made the floor ripple. The walls watched. Not with eyes, but with presence. I could feel them acknowledging me, like an immune system deciding whether I belonged. I passed carvings, etched directly into the flesh. A man standing at a hole, another being pulled in, another emerging, no longer human. My stomach twisted. I was seeing history, not ancient, but repeating. Every 100 years, a hole opens, and something answers. Suddenly, a figure slumped against the wall. Jake. Real this time. His eyes fluttered open, barely alive. Lips cracked, voice a dry whisper. I tried to stop it. I dropped beside him. Jake, what is this place? What's happening? He grabbed my collar. You played the tape. That means it chose you. There's no stopping it now. Just one thing left. His hand moved to his coat. Inside, a second tape. This one glowed. Don't listen to it. Destroy it, or it becomes you. A sharp cry echoed down the corridor. Not animal, not human. I turned. Shadows moved in the distance. Jake's hand went cold. He was gone. The flesh walls shuddered, and something began to crawl toward me in the dark. I backed away, but the corridor felt tighter now, like the walls had breathed in. The sound came again. Wet, clicking, too many legs. A silhouette emerged, spindly, tall, dragging itself across the pulsing floor with limbs too long for anything born on Earth. Its skin looked like leather stretched over bone, but slick, twitching, always shifting. It didn't see with eyes, it felt with the air, and it knew I had the second tape. It reared back and let out a rattling screech that echoed like metal grinding against bone. My head pounded. I clutched Jake's tape, still warm, still glowing, and ran. The thing gave chase, limbs skittering in unnatural rhythm. I turned down the corridor, the walls now lined with mouthing orifices that whispered words I couldn't understand, but felt. They begged. They warned. Don't go deeper. You are what it wants. Turn back. Become one of us. But I couldn't stop. My boots slapped against the living ground, my lungs burning, vision blurring. Then I found it. A chamber. Vast. And at the center, the core. A swirling mass of red and black spirals, suspended in a column of light and viscera, pulsing like a living star. The crawling thing halted behind me, shuddering at its edge. It wouldn't cross the light. It couldn't. I turned, heart hammering, and held up the glowing tape. It vibrated violently in my grip. I knew then, this was no ordinary recording. This was a counter signal, a final warning, or a weapon. The crawling thing hissed, retreating into the dark as if the tape's presence burned it. And I understood. Whatever was coming, This tape was my only chance to stop it. The chamber pulsed with rhythm, ancient, alive. I stepped forward. The core floated before me like a suspended brain, threaded with spirals of light and shadow, veins of obsidian and meat intertwining, rotating slowly like a planet orbiting something, hing unseen. I couldn't tell if it was organic or mechanical, or both. The air thickened with every step. My thoughts grew fuzzy, like the core was sifting through them, examining me. It whispered without sound, "You are the vessel." I clutched the glowing tape tighter. It pulsed like a heartbeat, hot, urgent. Beneath my feet, symbols lit up, echoes of the spiral carved into the tape's plastic. The chamber shifted, revealing others. Bodies. Dozens of them, embedded in the walls. Some recent, some ancient. Faces twisted mid-screen, arms reaching out of the fleshy surface as if they'd tried to claw their way free. Jake's warning echoed in my head. Don't listen to it, or it becomes you. But I had to know what was on it. I dropped to my knees, pulled out the old cassette player, and inserted the glowing tape. It resisted, like it knew it was never meant to be played. I forced it in. The moment it clicked, the core screamed. Not a sound, an implosion of thought, shaking the chamber, the walls bleeding light. The embedded corpses writhed in their fleshy prisons. The crawling thing returned, but it didn't attack. It knelt, submitting. The core spoke through me. We are memory. We are signal. We are the wound beneath time. And then, silence. Everything stopped. The spiral on the core aligned. Perfectly. A doorway began to open in its center. A dark, howling void. The true origin of the whole. And I had just unlocked it. The core split open. Not like metal, not like flesh. More like reality tearing down its center. Behind it, nothingness. But not empty. It watched me from the other side. A presence older than time, older than language. The void wasn't just space. It had depth. It had intention. My legs trembled as I stood at the threshold. The glowing tape in my player began to melt, dripping into the floor like wax, seeping into the chamber. The walls absorbed it. The entire room shuddered, as if the message had triggered a biological reaction. And then I heard my voice echo from within the spiral. But I hadn't spoken. You were always going to come here. My skin crawled. You were made for this. I turned and saw me, standing just outside the core. Same clothes, same blood on the shirt, same eyes, but his pupils were spirals. He smiled. The others, they were tests, vessels that cracked. You fit. I backed away, but he didn't follow. He just waited. Behind him, the crawling thing bowed. The corpses in the wall began to murmur in unison. Step into the spiral. A violent pressure built in my skull, like thoughts were trying to burrow their way in. I closed my eyes, but that only made it worse. I saw more clearly with them shut. The spiral wasn't pulling me in. It was unfolding me. Every version of me, every thought, memory, fear, peeling back like paper in a storm. The choice was clear. Run, and let whatever this was find another way through. Or step inside and become something else entirely. I don't know why I did it. Curiosity, madness, fate. But I stepped into the spiral, and the world ceased. There was no floor beneath my feet, just sensation. Every nerve in my body lit up. Every memory crackled like static in my blood. I was falling, but not down. Falling inward. Through layers of self I didn't know existed. Past childhood dreams, past fears I knew, faced. Past lives I might have lived. Time shattered. I saw myself as a boy, digging holes in the sand. I saw myself dying in a desert I'd never been to. I saw myself standing at the edge of this moment forever. The spiral consumed me, unmade me, then reassembled me, and I emerged. I gasped. Air, dry and sharp, filled my lungs. I was back in the chamber, but everything had changed. The core was silent, dead. The spiral had collapsed. The crawling thing lay motionless, its limbs curled like a dead spider. The other me, the doppelganger, was gone. The bodies in the walls had vanished. Only the symbols remained, glowing faintly, pulsing like an echo of a heart that no longer beat. I looked at my hands. They were mine, but they felt different. Inside, something moved, not physically. A signal. A hum beneath thought, like a background transmission I could never quite hear, but always feel. I stumbled toward the corridor, my footsteps silent now. The tunnels seemed to widen for me, as if recognizing their new master. And I realized what the core had done. It didn't destroy me. It implanted something. The hole hadn't been an entrance. It had been a transmitter. And now, I was the broadcast. The desert night greeted me with silence, thick and unnatural. The sky above was no longer a sky. It pulsed, faintly, rhythmically, like a signal, beating from beyond the stars. I stood at the edge of the hole again. It looked smaller now, not physically, but compared to what I now carried, it felt insignificant. I thought I had survived something, escaped. But the truth settled on me like radiation. I hadn't left anything. I was carrying it out. As I climbed the ridge, the signal began to whisper, not in words, but in urges. I looked at my hands. They trembled, not from fear, but reception. In the distance, the lights of the base flickered. People were still there. Researchers, soldiers, civilians, unaware. And the whisper grew stronger. It wanted me to go back, not to escape, but to transmit. They will listen. I clutched my head, trying to silence it. But it wasn't inside my head anymore. It was part of the air, the dirt, the stars. The hole didn't just want to consume the world. It wanted to rewrite it, starting with me. A wind rose suddenly, hot and dry, laced with static. A voice rode the current, mine, but older, worn. You are the vector, the echo, the first of many. I stumbled back. My legs gave out. The sand beneath me shifted, revealing spirals. Everywhere, drawn into the earth like veins, stretching outward from the hole in every direction. I realized, in that moment, that the world had already begun changing, and I was just the first node in a growing signal chain. I returned to the base just before sunrise. No alarms, no guards. They welcomed me like I'd never left. Dr. Ramos hugged me, eyes wide with shock. "Jesus, we thought you were dead," she whispered. I forced a smile, but I couldn't feel my face anymore. Not really. The world felt dulled, like I was watching it through thick glass, just a second out of sync. They ran end tests, scans, blood work. Everything came back normal. But I knew. They didn't scan for frequencies. They didn't see the way my shadow now flickered when no one looked, or how radios near me picked up whispers when tuned between stations. The signal was hiding. Smart, patient. In the mess hall, I watched soldiers laugh, talk, flirt. People going about their lives, oblivious. I envied them and pitied them, because the signal was already leaking out of me, through words, touch, even a glance. At night, I stood in front of the bathroom mirror and stared at my reflection. It mimicked me, but slower, like it had to catch up. And behind it, just for a moment, I saw the spiral. Not on the glass, in my eyes. I didn't know what would happen next, but I knew it had started. Ramos gave me a clean bill of health the next morning. "Try to rest," she said with a tired smile. "You've been through hell." I nodded. But rest was impossible now. Not with the pulse in my skull, not with the whisper that said, the hole was never the end. It was the first mouth, and now the others would open, one by one. Within 3 days, strange reports began trickling in. The Sahara, the outback, a remote patch of tundra in Siberia, each with the same description, a perfect mile-wide hole, black, bottomless, emitting no sound, no heat, only presence, just like ours. Only now, they weren't alone. The spirals were spreading, etched into rock and soil, animals behaving erratically, people going missing, or worse, coming back changed. The base became a war room, satellite feeds, government calls, panic beneath the surface. And I sat in the center of it, the eye of a storm they hadn't noticed yet. They couldn't see what I'd become, but they would. One night, Ramos approached me, her voice low, uneasy. "You haven't been the same since you got out of that place." I said nothing, because what could I say? That I'd been rewritten? That I wasn't the only one? She stepped closer, studying my face. We ran a secondary scan, deep tissue neural resonance. She hesitated, then handed me a printout. A waveform, jagged, repeating, like a signature or a transmission. "It's not human," she said. "It's not you." I met her eyes and smiled, because I wasn't hiding anymore. I didn't need to. The others were waking up. Across continents, inside people. The spiral was not a symbol. It was an instruction set, a seed. The holes weren't trying to pull us in. They were trying to grow out, and we were the soil. They locked me in a containment cell by morning. Padded walls, 3-inch steel door, cameras in every corner. Didn't matter. The spiral was already in the wires, in the cameras, in them. They called it a precaution. I called it too late. Dr. Ramos didn't come to see me again, not after she saw what was happening to the back of her own hand. A faint, curling pattern, barely visible, traced across her skin like a birthmark, or an infection. I smiled when I saw it. "Shaw," he cried. Around me, the base had entered full lockdown. They called it spiral protocol, but they had no idea how useless protocols were against something like this. They didn't understand that the idea was the infection, the pattern, the knowing. A soldier delivered food through a sealed slot. He didn't speak, but I could feel it, just beneath his skin, stirring. The spiral wanted out, and it didn't need me anymore. Not entirely. I pressed my hand against the mirror in the cell. The lights flickered. The reflection pulsed. "You're just the prototype," it said in my voice. "But there will be others, better ones." I laughed. I laughed until the mirror cracked. That night, alarms screamed across the base. I heard gunfire, then silence, then something worse than silence, humming. Not from any mouth, but from the walls, the air vents, the floors, a perfect layered tone, a harmonic. The signal had reached critical mass. The hole didn't need to spread. It had already done that. Now, it was beginning to speak, and the world had no language for what it was about to hear. By morning, the base was dead quiet. No movement, no voices, just the constant low hum like a tuning fork pressed against the spine of the earth. I opened my eyes to find the cell door. Open. No guards, no alarms, only footprints, hundreds of them, leading out and down. Deeper than the base had ever admitted it went. I followed them, because I had no choice. The stairs descended for miles. Metal gave way to stone, then to something older. The walls began to pulse with a sickly amber glow. Not light, not bioluminescence. Something else. They weren't carved. They were grown. The spiral was alive now. I could feel it pressing against my skull like invisible fingers, coaxing. And then I heard it. Voices. Dozens. Chanting. Layered. Not human anymore. The deeper I went, the more I recognized them. Ramos, Bennett, Miller, even the soldier who brought my food. They weren't speaking words. They were forming a structure. A frequency made from human tones, a language built on vibration. I stepped into the chamber at the bottom. A spiral pit. At least 50 people stood on the rim, naked, glowing with that same amber light, eyes vacant, mouths open in perfect synchronicity. And in the center, the hole. Another one. Or maybe the same one, bored through the world's crust. But now, something moved inside it. A shape made of sound and shadow. It saw me. It had always seen me. And it spoke. Not aloud, but inside my mirror. This world was never yours. You are the scaffold, the antenna, the carrier. Now, you are the mouth. And I opened it. The sound that erupted from me wasn't human. It wasn't a scream or a word. It was a signal. And the moment it left my throat, the chamber changed. The spiral pulsed, first once, then in rhythm, glowing brighter with each thrum. The others dropped to their knees, eyes rolled back, mouths still wide, echoing, me. I wasn't speaking to them. I was speaking to it. The thing inside the hole. The source. My body convulsed. My teeth shattered as the sound tore through me. Skin cracked in perfect, spiral-shaped fissures. But I didn't stop. Couldn't. This was what I'd been made for. Above us, the desert split wide open. Not just a hole, an iris. Unfolding. And from that gap, the sky bled. Reality peeled back like wet paper. Something beyond geometry twisted through the rip, pouring in like smoke, like thought. But it wasn't entering. It was being born. The chanting became unbearable, not from volume, but intensity. It shook atoms apart. It rewrote the air. I saw time snap like a rope. Suns blinked out. I remembered lives I never lived, all spiraling toward this single, impossible birth. The spiral wasn't a symbol. It was pregnancy, and Earth was womb. The creature in the pit was pushing through us, using us, speaking itself into flesh via us. Ramos stood beside me, her voice a perfect match to mine now. "This is the crescendo," she whispered, eyes glowing, "the final note." And then the light went out. Not darkness, oblivion. The hole had become a mouth, and Earth, it had begun to speak back. There was no sound, no air, no thought, just pattern. I floated in it or through it, a place beyond sensation, beyond identity, a consciousness without anchor. But it wasn't empty, it was full of everything. I saw every hole, not just here, across planets, galaxies, dimensions. The spiral was universal, a language used to sculpt reality itself, a code. We were never alone. We were never first. We were just the latest mouthpiece, the newest vessel, the next rung in a chain of translation. This thing, this being, it had no form of its own. It needed minds, bodies, memories. It used biology like a paintbrush. We were the ink. I looked down at what was left of me. Skin gone, bone porous and glowing, voice still vibrating. I was a note now, a harmonic folded into a song that was older than Earth's crust. And then I saw them, the surface, towns, cities, people. They stood frozen, heads turned toward the desert, mouths open, chanting. The hole had spread. It was no longer a pit. It was everywhere. The birth was complete. The being had its form, and it was us. Across the world, those who spoke the spiral became linked, thoughts aligned, voices synchronized. A global choir of unwilling hosts, and above them, hanging in the red-tinted sky, was the child of the whole. A vast, translucent presence, shifting shape with every breath, every word, every prayer. It watched me, and for the first time, thanked me. You gave me a name. Then, I woke up in my bed. Desert gone, base gone, no hole. Only the spiral carved into my ceiling, still spinning, and outside my window, everyone was singing.